Hi everyone, it's Anton here, and I keep getting more and more requests on Instagram about some of the photography that I post there, and specifically about the retouch process that I go through. So I was thinking I would record a couple of videos and talk about my retouch flow and how I retouch photographs and what are the common things that I usually do in order to get from a picture like this to this clean beauty airplane here, almost in a white background. So I was thinking I would start with this image, which is the image that I took last weekend at the airport here in Barcelona. And a couple of tech specs. I usually use Lightroom just to go through all my images. So those are all raw images in Lightroom. I try to only use Lightroom, but then when I need something more specific, I usually switch to Photoshop, and that's where I finalize and retouch final image. A couple of settings that I had to set here. You can see that this image it's a plane that's moving really fast right above me. So I really had to make sure my shutter speed is really fast. So you can see that it's set here to 1 to thousandths of a second. My aperture is closed enough to have image really sharp and clear. So I had to go to 9.5. So basically everything above f-stop 8. And the thing is that this image was shot with Leica M, and Leica M has completely manual focusing. So I actually have to focus before I take a picture. Obviously using 200 ISO, and it was shot at a 28mm wide angle. So that also helps me. Using wide angle, usually you end up having everything in focus. So that's another important thing here. And you can see that I set those settings, and I'm kind of standing there in front of at the very end of a landing strip, and I'm just capturing this plane one by one, picture by picture, up until I get essentially this picture. And then I just turn around and it's already landing there. So a couple of things that I gotta do here first, and specifically this image is not really hard, just because, well, the first thing I really have to do here is set my exposure. And we're lucky here because I don't have anything on the background. It's just basically blue sky. If I were to have a background with, let's say, mountains or something distinguishable, it would be quite tough, just because by making my plane brighter, I would make brighter everything else in the background. So in this case, I would really have to work with masking and mask out this entire plane and change exposure just for the plane and keeping background intact. Usually when I would start with Lightroom, I would actually straighten up the picture. But here, I really don't want to do that because you can see I'm losing some important information. I'm actually cropping nose of the plane that I want to redraw a little bit later, and I'm cropping this right wing here. So in this case, I'm going to cancel it. I'm going to retouch image while it's a little bit tilted like that. So the next thing that I would always do first is just adjust the temperature. The one thing I don't like here is that my plane is yellow. And it's kind of hard to see, but if you only focus in the center here, you would see that the body of the plane is yellowish and orangey and red. So I want to go towards cold temperature to get it almost gray. And then at the same time, I'm going to just tint not to keep it green. So basically, the more I go here, the greener the plane becomes. And more I go to the right, the pinkish or reddish my plane becomes. So I want to stay somewhere in the middle. And one important thing is I want to get rid of the sky. And it's pretty simple hack in Lightroom where you can always control individual colors. So the next thing I would do is I would go to blue color, which is this one. And first thing, I want to make it gray. So I'm going to go in and saturate only blue color. And I also want to make it white. So you can see I can make it much darker. And you start seeing all the artifacts, and the image is quite dirty, and the bird actually managed to be in the frame. So I want to go the opposite direction and just basically make my background white. So I now have this plane, and there are a couple of other things I really want to do. So the first thing is this information is now being lost a little bit where it's all black. I can do it by decreasing contrast, but it affects an entire image. The next thing I want to do is maybe get rid of some shadows. So you can see the wings are pretty dark. With highlights, I can do either I can make background a little bit more gray, or I can make plain standout and actually pull highlights a little bit up. Usually that's not recommended. Most of the time I retouch my photographs. I have highlights somewhere here, shadows here, whites here, and blacks here, just to get image a little bit more flat and not lose anything in the highlights and anything in the shadows. But in this specific case, it's a bit different. I'm only working with the body of the plane, and I want to make sure it actually stands out a little bit more. Now, there are two things that I always use, is clarity and dehaze, and they actually work very differently. So in this case, I'm going to use clarity just because I'm working with pretty much black and white picture. Dehaze is great for color. So every time I have a picture that has color, I would use dehaze to increase color and contrast between color. But in this case, you can see the moment I increase dehaze, I get to see this orange and yellow, which of course I can get rid of here, but it feels like a completely unnecessary step at this stage. So I'm just going to use clarity just to get things a little bit more sharper. All right, what else? This thing is I usually touch is basically just working with shadows. So I want to increase that a little bit again, just to get the shadows in here and get information of all the wheels here. Couple of other things. Since this image doesn't have any color, I can actually change vibrance, and I can almost make this image black and white. So the one thing I don't really like about Illustrator is that if I make my entire image black and white, I cannot change color temperature again, meaning I can't apply an extra level of color temperature on top of the black and white picture. And that's something that I gotta do in Photoshop a little bit later. So you can see that if I start changing temperature, since I didn't change red colors in here, everything red will start showing up. But the moment I'm in somewhere there in the blue, everything becomes more and more white. So I can actually tweak temperature now a little bit more, just to get the right shape of the picture. And vibrance is a little bit maybe too much. Let's do this. And we are almost done here. There are a couple of other things that we can do. We can remove chromatic aberration, just in case if there are any. Enable profile corrections. Usually when you shoot at a wide angle, your picture is a little bit distorted. So you can see it's not a lot of effect, but if I shoot with my Canon, it's actually quite a lot of effect. So I usually add this thing. A couple of other things we can do. We can actually add some sharpening. Let me get this thing right. Lens correction, so it's somewhere here. So let's sharpen this image. I can get to see a little bit of a preview in here. So I can kind of sharpen that. What else? I don't want to do any noise reduction just because I don't have much noise. Actually, we can get a little bit here, but not more than that. And then maybe I can pull back a little bit of contrast. So now we have an image that used to be something, actually I think it's looking at my previous setting, but it used to be, if I do reset and I go back, so you can see before and after. So the next thing I want to do is, when all the settings here in Lightroom are done, I want to bring it into Photoshop and continue editing there. So I'm going to click Edit in Adobe Photoshop. This whole thing is going to load, hopefully, and then I'm going to continue working in there. Alright, so let me put it back into where it's supposed to be. Go full screen. So now I can finally rotate my image. So I'm going to just duplicate it just in case, so I have it there. And I'm going to rotate this image and try to adjust it. It's important that I don't have, let me show you guys, this checkbox in. So for example, if I were to have, by default, I think it's in, and every time I correct my image, it just keeps deleting cropped pixels. So I want to make sure that I have all the cropped pixels in there. Now, a couple of other things I can do here. Now I can finally change color balance. So I have this relatively black and white image, and I can click on color balance and tweak it a little bit because I want to get this picture a little bit blue, so you can see here. So it looks a little bit more natural and not completely black and white. So if I zoom in, you get to see that change here. The next thing I want to do is center it a little bit and get my nose in. So let me do this first. So I'm gonna make my canvas much bigger, like this, and then I'm gonna move my plane down in here. Let's hide this guy. So okay, I have my plane. Now I gotta fill this with background color. And you can see I have a lot of this kind of leftover, so I really have to fix this part. There are a couple of things I want to do. I can change it with masking, but the quickest one would be to go in, create, let's say, channel mixture, go to monochrome, mask it inside this object, and I want to do overlay. So that kind of helped me get rid of this background a little bit. The one thing now I can maybe, let's actually do this easier. Maybe I can just do masking. So I'm gonna go with a brush. I'm gonna increase its size so it's easy on this end. And on this end is not that easy. So the couple of things we can do is we can go back here and use the gradient tool, something like this. And you can see that I'm evening out left part and right part. Now the gradients has its own settings. I can change, for example, just the temperature of a left part, which I don't want to do, though it actually looks a little bit better. But the most important is exposure. So I want to make sure that our exposure on the left part is quite similar to the one on the right part. So let me close it again, and I'm gonna go and click Edit in Photoshop. I might have to close the previous picture in order to do that. All right, let's drag this one here. This one we don't need anymore. So I'm gonna make a copy. All right, now I'm gonna scale my background just a little bit so I have space to work with. I can now tweak this image so it's a little bit, so it's symmetrical. I don't have anything here, so I'm gonna move this down, get rid of this image. Now I have to fill in with background color. Okay, much better. So this is much easier to work with. And you can see there are some differences, but it's going to be quite easy to mask them out. So I create a mask, and just with a really big brush, I can go through some of the details and get rid of them here on the screen. So you can see it's now quite seamless. There are a couple of things left out here that I can adjust super quickly. We can go back into details and tweak it more carefully. This is just more of an overview. So I have this plane, I have this background, and the next thing that I want to do is continue the nose of the plane. There are a couple of things, a couple of easy tricks you can do. I think the easiest one would be, let's just draw it by hand, something like this. There's going to be a center, and it goes somewhere in here. And we kind of need this area underneath so we can edit things. All right, so I can fill this with a color. All right, so we kind of need this. We want to put this more in the center. Put this one here. Okay, so we have a nose over the plane. Now we just need to fill in with a similar texture. Just get this one from here, from a belly. I copy that, and I'm gonna paste in here. And align it. All right. So the biggest difference here is that you can see that the plane is getting much brighter here. So we can try and mimic similar thing with a brush until we kind of blend it together. Just little by little. So it would be probably something similar like this. Now, this is our texture that we can get rid of. Let's now adjust the shape a little bit because it feels a bit too wide and doesn't really match what we're trying to do. Let's try another texture. Let's try to get it from here. So it's not so dark. I'm gonna go copy that from the belly and then put it back here. Gonna align it. So this one is a little bit better. Now the easiest thing is now open up levels, and I want to make sure that they match a little bit, because right now you can feel that. Let me cancel that. It's a little bit more red than this one, so I'm gonna actually decrease saturation to get it closer. And let me turn off whites. And I can move it just to get it somewhere right. I can get this guy to white. And the highlights, I want to also keep them fairly white. Okay, so we are somewhere there. The next thing, it's possible I can merge all of this, so I can just continue working with this shape, and I can get rid of this, just seeing how much information I'm missing. I kind of want to get this box back, and using a brush, I want to blend it more with the background here. All right, I'm keep touching the brightness button. All right, a little bit better, and I think that this nose is just a tiny bit darker, so I'm gonna get back to this. So the idea is that here, from here, it's completely I just basically got that nose back real quick. So the easiest thing now, or the best thing to do right now, is to change its color balance, which I mentioned that I can't do in Lightroom, but here I have this picture which is almost black and white, and on top of that I can adjust color temperature. So what I want to do is make this a little bit more blue, because my picture is still kind of yellow, and I don't want to make it completely black and white just because it's going to ruin all my texture there. So I'm going to go towards blue here and towards cyan just a little bit into like -4. So you get to see that my picture gets not this yellowish red, but now back to blue. There are a couple of other things that is important to do here. One is to adjust contrast, and you can do it by many things: level, curves. My favorite one is I would go to channel mixture, I would keep it monochrome, and I would set it to overlay or soft light. And from here you can see that all the highlights and all the shadows starts to pop a little bit more. The only difficult part here is that I'm getting more black here on the wheels, so I want to click on a mask and just with a soft brush maybe get rid of it, but maybe somehow kind of carefully so I don't lose all that other information. Maybe with a much even bigger one. All right. Now another thing I want to do is, you can see that the wings are really dark, so I want to brighten them up. So I'm going to create a new layer that's empty, and I'm going to put here 50% gray, which is not visible in overlay, so you probably know that. So if I have 50% gray and I say to overlay, it's not visible. If I somehow manage to delete my nose of the plane, that was a layer for that. So I'm going to do it again, set it to overlay. Now, if I make this gray brighter here, let's say like that, the image becomes brighter. If I make this gray darker, the image becomes darker. So I'm just using now dodge and burn. So it's almost like a way of using dodge and burn without destructing your image or without ruining your image. So you can see here in a preview is that the gray in this part of gray, let me put it back to normal, it just became brighter. And if I don't like this result, I can always select brush and just paint it over. So I don't actually destroy image. It's almost like an adjustment layer, but a little bit with a hack. So I'm going to brush it out here as well, like a little bit more. All right, you can do the same with a burn tool. So for example, if there are certain things that you want to even out, so let's say I want to do something with the belly, I can make this much, much darker by using the burn tool, but I don't want to do this right now. The only thing I want to keep is I want to make brighter wings, but I kind of went way too much, I think. Anyway, let's just decrease opacity. Channel, let's maybe try to set it to overlay. All right, that actually is much better. The other thing, so I'm losing a lot of information here, but for the sake of this picture, it's nice. All right, I don't want to keep it yellow. All right, let's maybe do overlay, but not keep it at 100%, but keep it 80, for example. Okay, and let's get rid of this mask. The one that was covering the wheels, I just want to make sure that the wheels stand out a little bit more. And the other thing that I always do is I go to selective color, and here are a couple of things you can do here. First of all, you can work with blacks. So for example, everything, I control all the blacks right now. So I can make them almost white, and I can make them black. You can set up contrast this way, but I can just basically return some of the blacks to normal. I can control yellow, so if I move here, you can see everything that used to be black becomes blue. So you can actually create halftone images or halftone effect using the properties like this. Or I can make it more yellow. So I don't want to have anything yellow, I just want to have it a little bit more blue. And all the other ones work same way, but I don't just need them for this specific image. I can go to neutrals. Now I can control neutral color. So I can make everything a little bit brighter again, and everything more blue or everything more yellow. Maybe adding yellow kind of will help here. And what's important is white. So basically white I can make pop out again, or I can make it brighter. But in this case, specifically to get that clean look, I need to move the black part of the white color a little bit more here. And that's pretty much it. The other one thing I would usually do to keep image even sharper, so we're looking at it at 100% and it's quite sharp, is I would have to copy my picture, and I can't copy the original just because this one is, I used a little bit of rotation. So I want to take maybe a background, this picture and this and nose of the plane. I can put it in a group. We'll call it retouch just in case I need it in the future. I'm going to duplicate it again and merge it. So right now I have just a merged picture. I want to duplicate this picture again, go to filter, other, and create high pass. So high pass is this thing where it takes parts of the picture where there is no information and makes it gray. And then everywhere where we had shadows and whites, it creates this black and white texture that you can see here. Now this is way too much, so I usually try high pass at 1, and I keep playing maybe even less. So what I want to achieve here is a picture or a texture where I only get details. I want to make sure I don't get any noise, because that affects every single pixel in the picture. So I want to make sure everywhere where I have or is supposed to have seamless color, such as sky or middle part of the wings, doesn't have any information there, but only texture like nuts and bolts of this plane, of the belly of the plane. I want to keep those lines in. So I'm going to hit OK. And what I want to do is, again, set it to overlay. So I'm back to my picture, but you can see if I hide layer and put it back, maybe it's hard to see specifically on this video, but the image becomes much, much sharper. So it's a way to sharpen your details without affecting everything. So if I were to use regular sharpening through here, it would sharpen my sky. And if I were to have any texture in the sky, it would become more visible, or it would sharpen this parts of the plane. And I don't want texture to become more obvious. All I want to do is make all this stitching, all the panels a little bit more visible. All right, so this would be the final image. And what would be easier if I go here to back to Lightroom, grab this image, drag it to Photoshop here, hit OK. Those are the raw settings that I don't need right now. Let me put it back to where it's supposed to be. Copy, and I'm going to put it here back on original, all the way at the top. All right, so this is what we had, and this is what we got. And usually, I'm not sure how long this video took me. What is it, 25 minutes, and I kept talking over every single thing, but usually it's just a 10-minute fix. And in 10 minutes, you can get this picture that was shot completely against the sun, and then get it to something clean, almost like a commercial image for the airplane. I hope that helps. If you have any questions or anything, I don't know, comment somewhere, don't email me. let's keep this conversation in one place.